Get some cash. Marina. Plenty of dollars. Plenty of dollars. Can we get... Yeah, very sad. Because we've gone nowhere. It sounds like we've grown nothing. We've learned nothing. We're still going down that path of destruction. There was no man that was actually helping. Different methods were tried. But still, how did their lives take such heartbreaking turns? Let's dive into the tragic story of the O.J.'s and their sad endings. Williams, the O.J.'s. Thank you so much. After 44 years in this extremely mean business, finally, the story begins in Canton, Ohio, where the original members, Eddie Levert, Walter Williams, William Powell, Bobby Massey, and Bill Isles, formed a doo-wop group in 1958. They were still teenagers, full of ambition and raw talent. Back then, they weren't called the O.J.'s. They went by the Triumphs before briefly becoming the Mascots. We became the O.J.'s because we didn't have a name that we liked. Nathan at King Records had named us the Mascots because he wanted a two-syllable name. It wasn't until a Cleveland DJ named Eddie O.J. took them under his wing that they adopted the name that would eventually become legendary. You came up with the name O.J. is from Eddie O.J. in Cleveland, Ohio. That was a DJ and he promoted your very first song, correct? Yes. In those early days, the group struggled to find their sound and footing in the music industry. They spent much of their time singing covers and performing at small venues, hustling for any opportunity that came their way. Their break came when they signed with King Records in the early '60s, releasing singles like Lonely Drifter. While these tracks showed promise, they didn't gain the traction the group had hoped for. The grind wasn't easy, and the lack of major success put a strain on the group. Over time, Bobby Massey and Bill Isles decided to leave, unable to cope with the uncertainties of life as struggling musicians. Their departures left Eddie Levert, Walter Williams, and William Powell as a trio, a setup that would define the core of the O.J.'s for years to come. Even with a streamlined lineup, the group faced an uphill battle. By the late 1960s, they were still searching for their big break. Their move to Philadelphia in 1972 marked a turning point. That year, they began working with the now legendary production team of Kenny Gamble and Leon Howe, who were in the process of shaping the Philadelphia soul sound. Their first collaboration, Backstabbers, was a smash hit. And just like that, the O.J.'s transformed from struggling underdogs to industry heavyweights. Songs like Love Train and For the Love of Money cemented their legacy. But while they were finally achieving their dreams, the journey to get there had taken its toll. And not all of the members were ready for the rigors of fame. The O.J.'s success didn't come without heartbreak, particularly when it came to losing members and dealing with health issues. The most significant loss for the group was William Powell, one of the founding members who had been with Eddie and Walter since the beginning. It all started in the mid-1970s when Powell began experiencing health issues. At the time, the O.J.'s were riding high on their success with hits like Love Train and Backstabbers. Powell was living his dream, but behind the scenes, he wasn't feeling well. He started noticing symptoms that wouldn't go away. Fatigue, weakness, and eventually pain. It became clear that something was wrong. Doctors eventually diagnosed Powell with cancer. The news was devastating. Powell was a young man in his mid-30s with a thriving career and so much left to give. Cancer wasn't as well understood then as it is now, and treatments were harsh and limited. Eddie Levert and Walter Williams were deeply affected by Powell's departure. They had been through so much together. From struggling to get gigs in Canton to topping the charts, Powell's absence left a void in the group's sound and dynamic. But even more, it left an emotional gap in their brotherhood. Powell tried to fight it, but the disease progressed quickly. He continued to perform for as long as he could, but the illness started taking a toll on his ability to keep up with the grueling schedule of a touring musician. By 1976, Powell's health had declined so much that he had to step away from the O.J.'s. It was a heartbreaking decision, but he couldn't keep going at the pace the group demanded. He was replaced by Sammy Strain, and the O.J.'s carried on. But Powell's absence was deeply felt by his bandmates and fans alike. Powell spent his final months surrounded by loved ones. He passed away on May 26, 1977, at just 35 years old. Sadly, William Powell died May 26, 1977. He died of colon cancer. He was diagnosed in 1975. His death was a significant loss to the music world. Powell had been an integral part of shaping the OJ's signature sound and was instrumental in their rise to fame. But the challenges didn't stop there. Over the years, both Eddie Levert and Walter Williams faced their own health struggles, forcing them to take a hard look at their lifestyles and priorities. Walter Williams in particular faced a life-altering diagnosis in the early 2000s. It all started in 2009, when Walter began feeling unwell. He was dealing with chronic pain and some strange symptoms that didn't seem to go away. At first, like most people, he brushed it off as something minor, maybe just the stress of the long touring schedule, or the wear and tear on his body after years of performing. But as the symptoms persisted, it became clear that it was something more serious. Doctors diagnosed Walter with a condition called spinal stenosis, a narrowing of the spaces in the spine that puts pressure on the nerves. It's a painful and debilitating condition, and for someone like Walter, whose career relied on his energy and ability to perform, it was a major blow. Spinal stenosis can cause intense pain, numbness, weakness, and in some cases, loss of mobility. And it quickly became clear that Walter wasn't going to be able to continue his usual schedule with the band. There was no meds that was actually helping. Different methods were tried with steroids. In 2010, after a period of struggling with the pain and trying to push through it, Walter made the difficult decision to step back from performing for a while to focus on his health. It wasn't easy, especially since he had been a cornerstone of the OJs for so many years. But he knew he had to put his well-being first. The band, of course, supported him fully, and his absence left a noticeable gap in their shows. But Walter's health was the top priority. The recovery process wasn't quick. Walter went through physical therapy, working with specialists who helped him strengthen his back and regain some mobility. The road to recovery was filled with challenges. There were moments when it seemed like the pain might never go away. But Walter is nothing if not determined. He took the time to rest, heal, and really focus on his recovery. His faith and mental toughness also played a big role. Since then, I've been able to live a normal, healthy life. What goes along with that is a great attitude about it. He found solace in his spirituality and in the support of his family, friends, and fans, all of whom kept rooting for his return. By 2012, after 2 years of focused treatment and rest, Walter was able to rejoin the OJs on stage. Though he wasn't fully back to his old self at first, he slowly regained his strength and was able to perform again. Eddie Levert also had his share of battles. While he didn't face the same health struggles as Williams, he experienced tremendous personal loss that tested his spirit. It started with Gerald Levert, Eddie's eldest son. Gerald was a powerhouse in the music world, carving out his own legacy with a successful solo career. And as part of the group, Levert alongside his brother, Sean, and childhood friend, Mark Gordon, Gerald had a soulful voice that could bring tears to your eyes. And he was celebrated for hits like Casanova and Baby Hold On To Me, a duet with his dad. He was the epitome of charm and talent. But behind the scenes, Gerald struggled with health issues. On November 10, 2006, Gerald tragically passed away at the age of 40. His death was sudden and shocking. A lethal combination of prescription medications and over-the-counter drugs, taken to ease chronic pain and insomnia, led to his untimely demise. The news devastated Eddie. Losing a child is a wound that never heals. And for Eddie, losing Gerald felt like losing a part of himself. Their bond was more than just father and son. They were collaborators and best friends. Gerald's death left a void in Eddie's life that could never be filled. Barely 2 years later, in 2008, Eddie faced another tragedy when his younger son, Sean Levert, passed away. Sean was 39 years old and had also made his mark in music alongside his brother in Levert. His death, however, was surrounded by even more heartbreak and controversy. Sean was serving a 22-month sentence for unpaid child support at the Cuyahoga County Jail in Cleveland, Ohio. When he fell ill, he began exhibiting bizarre behavior, reportedly screaming and banging on his cell door. Jail staff restrained him, but Sean's condition worsened, and he died after being taken to a hospital. Sean's death was later ruled as complications from sarcoidosis, an inflammatory disease aggravated by withdrawal from his prescribed anxiety medication. The tragedy raised serious questions about the care he received while incarcerated. For Eddie, the pain of losing Sean so soon after Gerald was almost unbearable. To lose both sons, his pride, his legacy, his heart, in such a short span of time was a blow that tested his strength and faith. Eddie has often spoken about how the losses changed him forever. He channeled his grief into his music and his faith, using both as a means of coping. Though the pain never truly goes away, Eddie continues to honor Gerald and Sean by keeping their memories alive, both on stage and off. Now, like many successful artists, the OJs didn't just face the standard pressures of fame. Along the way, they also encountered significant legal and financial hurdles that could have easily derailed their careers. The glitz and glamour of the music industry often hides the darker side. And for the OJs, the battles they fought behind the scenes were just as intense as the ones they faced on stage. One of the earliest and most impactful financial struggles the OJs faced was related to their early record deals. Back in the 60s and 70s, the music industry was notorious for taking advantage of artists, and the OJs were no exception. They initially signed with King Records, a label that didn't have the best reputation when it came to treating its artists fairly. While the group was able to record and release music, the financial terms of their contract left them with little to show for their hard work. King Records wasn't paying the OJs the royalties they deserved, and this became a serious issue as the group began to gain traction. Despite chart-topping hits and sold-out performances, the OJs weren't seeing the kind of money they should have been. This financial disparity forced them to reevaluate their situation and eventually led them to leave King Records behind. But the process of disentangling themselves from such a bad contract wasn't easy, and they had to fight for what was rightfully theirs. Their next move was crucial. The OJs signed with Philadelphia International Records in 1972, which was the beginning of their rise to stardom. However, even though this new chapter saw greater commercial success, they still faced ongoing financial battles. The label was run by Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff, who had a brilliant ear for music and helped shape the distinct Philly soul sound. Yet the business side of things still wasn't perfect. Many artists, including the OJs, found themselves entangled in complex contracts that didn't always work out in their favor. As their career grew, so did the OJs' financial woes. In the 1980s and 1990s, the group faced a series of legal challenges that stemmed from disputes over royalties and ownership of their music. Their success had garnered attention, but it also led to several legal battles over who had the rights to their iconic songs. With the rise of music video channels and digital streaming, issues around intellectual property became more pronounced, and the OJs were left to navigate the complex world of royalties, publishing rights, and licensing fees. But it wasn't just the contracts that caused trouble. Personal financial issues also crept into the picture. Members of the group, like Eddie Levert, found themselves dealing with the pressures of managing personal finances, which included supporting family members and facing the typical pitfalls that come with being in the spotlight. With large amounts of money coming in, it's easy for things to get out of hand, especially when there isn't enough education on how to handle it. The OJs also had to deal with business partners who were more focused on their own gain than on the well-being of the group. At one point, they were embroiled in a legal battle with a former manager who they felt was taking advantage of their earnings. These legal disputes caused a great deal of stress, and the band members began to realize that in an industry full of opportunistic figures, they had to be vigilant about who they trusted. It was a lesson that many artists learned too late in their careers. But for the OJs, it was an awakening. As the OJs gained success, they also found themselves in the midst of mounting pressure to continue delivering hits and staying relevant in a rapidly changing music landscape. And other musical movements in the 80s. The OJs had made their name with smooth ballads and funk-infused tracks, but there was always the question of how to evolve without losing what made them great. This creative struggle was especially difficult for Walter Williams, who, despite being the group's primary lead singer along with Eddie, often found himself torn between his artistic vision and the pressures of staying commercially viable. As the music industry shifted toward the more synthesized sounds of the 80s, the OJs were faced with a choice: stick to their signature sound or experiment with the new trends that were sweeping the charts. Their approach was a mix of both. They continued to deliver their soulful ballads, but they also ventured into more contemporary sounds, which didn't always resonate with fans the same way their earlier hits had. The OJs' albums from the 80s and 90s, such as When Will I See You Again and Love Train, the best of the OJs, were filled with a mix of both old and new as they tried to navigate these ever-shifting creative waters. At the same time, the group felt the pressures of the industry to maintain their status as icons. Record labels, management, and promoters pushed for more singles, more albums, and more tours. all while competing in an increasingly crowded market. The OJs, however, were unwilling to compromise their artistry for the sake of staying current. They wanted to stay true to their roots, even if it meant not keeping up with the trends. The strain of balancing their creative direction with the commercial pressures of the industry was something that wore on the group over the years. Despite their immense success, the OJs often felt like they were walking a tightrope, trying to please their loyal fans while also adapting to new sounds that the industry demanded. Well, as far as sound, well, if you cut it in Philly, it's going to sound like Philly. You know, and that's the way it is. It's a Philadelphia. The tension between staying true to themselves as artists and the financial pressures of the industry became more pronounced as they entered the 90s. In the end, the OJs succeeded by doing what they have always done best, being true to their sound, even as the industry evolved around them. The OJs' legacy is particularly remarkable given the personal and professional struggles they've faced over the years. Yet despite all the turmoil, they've managed to create a lasting imprint on the world of music that endures to this day. It's easy to forget that the OJs' success didn't come overnight. Like many artists, they had to deal with the ups and downs of the music industry, the frustrations of financial mismanagement, and the challenges of staying relevant in a constantly evolving scene. But even amidst the turmoil, they produced some of their most iconic work. Albums like Backstabbers, 1972, and Ship Ahoy, 1973 weren't just commercially successful. They helped define the sound of an era, and songs like Love Train, For the Love of Money, and Backstabbers became anthems that transcended time and place. These songs weren't just hits, they were part of a movement. They reflected the pulse of America during the early 70s, capturing the mood of a society in flux. Despite their own struggles with personal and professional challenges, these songs were born out of the same tenacity and resilience that defined the OJs as a group. Also, their ability to maintain their bond as a group despite all the challenges is another testament to their enduring legacy. It would have been easy to walk away after so many years of struggle, but the OJs understood that their music was bigger than any personal issues they were dealing with. They had a duty to their fans, to the music, and to the generations that would come after them. And so, they kept going. But on the music industry as a whole, their achievements are numerous, from chart-topping hits to sold-out tours, and their influence is felt far beyond their own genre. The OJs are often credited with helping to shape the sound of Philadelphia soul, a genre that emerged in the early 1970s and became a major force in the music world. They were one of the first groups to successfully blend soulful melodies with socially conscious lyrics, tackling issues like injustice, betrayal, and love in their music. This unique combination helped make them stand out from other soul acts at the time, and it gave their songs a depth that continues to resonate today. As the OJs built their career, they also became major figures in the development of funk music, helping to lay the foundation for the genre's rise in the 70s. They were innovators, unafraid to experiment with different styles and approaches, and as a result, they influenced generations of artists who came after them. The OJs' impact wasn't limited to just music. They were pioneers in terms of representation, helping to pave the way for Black artists to gain a foothold in mainstream media. Their success on the charts was a reflection of the growing recognition of Black artists in the 70s and 80s. Perhaps one of the most significant markers of their legacy is their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2005. Thank you so much. After 44 years in this extremely mean business, finally, this honor cemented their place in the pantheon of great American artists. It was a long time coming, but the OJs finally received the recognition they deserved. Their place in music history is now secure, and their influence will continue to be felt for generations to come. Beyond the accolades, the true measure of their legacy is in the impact they've had on fans, musicians, and fellow artists. Countless people can point to the OJs as a major influence on their own musical journey. The band's work has been sampled, covered, and revered by artists from all genres, and their songs continue to be played in clubs, on the radio, and at parties.